So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the press conference of the CEO Maxim Timchenko. And today we'll have a conversation on the energy sector of Ukraine, current problems, global challenges, and possible solutions. Thank you for joining this event, both online and offline. And just a few words on our agenda today. We'll have two blocks. In the beginning, there will be a briefing by Maxim Timchenko, and then we'll have a small session, Q&A session with the journalists. I'm confident that today most of you will be able to learn more about the processes within the energy sector of Ukraine, as the CEO of the DTEK will be able to provide you with detailed information. At this point, I'd like to pass the floor to Maxim Timchenko. So please, the floor is yours. I'm very happy to see all of you today. For all those who joined us online and offline, I believe this is a very important meeting in order to understand not only the current situation with the energy sector of Ukraine, as well as the level of our preparation to the autumn and winter, as well as to talk on fundamental aspects with regards to the development of our sector, as well as the involvement of Ukraine in the global trends. I would like to start with my just recent trip to Glasgow. As you know, since November the 1st, a UN conference is in progress in Glasgow. And this is very important discussions featuring the heads of states and government and experts with regards to the further developments in the world, the response that we need with regards to the global warming, the response that has to be taken on the part of the states and the businesses in order to prevent the global warming by more than 1.5 degrees, as mentioned by the Paris Accords. And Ukrainian delegation was under the chairmanship of the president, who delivered his own briefing during this conference. So we'll be setting the trends with regards to a number of very important issues, including the net zero carbon and many other aspects. And Ukraine took a very important commitments. Since we were part of the Ukrainian delegation for the first time, the commitments taken by different countries clearly indicate that it is possible to reduce the global warming and to prevent the global warming by 2.0 degrees. At least currently, the predictions say we would be able to reduce the global warming by 1.8 degrees. At the same time, I was deeply touched by the statements that the heads of the state would be able to agree on more than 2.0 degrees. In fact, this is a very difficult figure for us, because for us it would be important to have 1.5 degrees. I believe that every one of us, not only in terms of the state, but the businesses and the sector, they have to be very serious with regards to the commitments. Speaking on the decisions that was made in the course of the conference, most of the G20 countries have decided to ensure there would be net zero carbon by 2050. As you know, a couple of years ago, the UK and Canada has initiated a new alliance, a new initiative on net zero carbon, and more than 40 countries committed themselves to ensure they would be abandoning the use of coal by 2030 or 2040. Then a new initiative was introduced on reducing the methane emissions. Particularly, some of the countries mentioned the reduction of methane by 30% until the period of 2030. And methane is one of the very toxic gases that has a significant impact on global warming. That was a very important decision. Another decision was made that was supported by over 100 countries with regards to the preservation of forests. And those 100 countries, they have more than 85% of the forests. And that's a very important decision. And it's very good that Ukraine has been joining those initiatives. This is a very important political signal of Ukraine at the international arena. And over the last 3 years, we are introducing very important statements with regards to our net zero carbon commitments. And those statements that were mentioned by President Zelensky, they allow us to say that we can be the leading nations in terms of the net zero carbon commitments in our region. We would need to reduce the emissions by 60% if compared to 1990 indicators. The European Union have introduced lesser commitments, but still we had a decrease in the development of economy, and therefore there was a reduction in the level of emissions. But still, this is a very important indicator for Ukraine. Another important statement was delivered by Ukraine with regards to joining the initiative on abandoning the use of coal, and Ukraine stated on the abandoning the use of coal until the period of 2035. And this is a very important statement for the further development of strategic plans for Ukraine. Reducing the methane emissions was also something that Ukraine has joined, introducing a commitment to reduce the methane emissions by 30% until the period of 2030. The issue of net zero carbon and the issue of emissions is something that energy sector has a very important role to play. And of course, the future development of the energy sector and the plans with regards to the use of the combination of the energy production facilities to introduce the fulfillment of these commitments. DTEK is a powerful actor, and in 2020 our company has committed to ensure net zero carbon by 2040. And I would say that we are the leaders in promoting these initiatives for Ukraine. This is the graph that demonstrates our mixture in the consumption of the electricity energy based on the strategy that we have for the period until 2030. As you can see, there is a reduction in the coal consumption for the electricity production, which is balanced by the renewables. At the same time, there is a statement with regards to abandoning the use of coal, and still we can see that 13% of the electricity would be produced with the use of coal, which is a controversy in terms of the statements released. And there were fairly ambitious plans with regards to the development of RAS, which would require the construction of the solar power stations, which are an important driver for the net zero carbon, and therefore we need to ensure the development of the storage facilities for the electricity. We were the first one to construct a project on the storage facilities for electricity. Now we are about to launch another project for 50 megabytes. And I would say that the pilot project has produced a significant promotion with regards to the development of the energy sector. And we are showing the rest of the companies, the investors, that we do need those storage capacities and there is a need to invest in that. Speaking about the green hydrogen, as you're well aware, the EU strategy has a special role for Ukraine in terms of the production of the green hydrogen. Ukraine has already been mentioned in the strategy, and part of the production capacities with regards to the green hydrogen are being allocated to Ukraine. This is yet an important aspect with regards to attracting the investments, and Ukraine will be able to have a very significant role to play as the leading country in the net zero carbon commitments and as the supplier of the new technologies and as the green supplier of the green hydrogen as the new types of fuel. But once again, this is a perspective, a future perspective. This is not something we will see tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. It requires the investments, but if the state would support this, this is possible. One of the important aspects that were not raised, but the participants of the conference started mentioning the renaissance of the nuclear power plants and nuclear energy, and speaking on the clear technologies and the clear electricity. It's still unclear the role of the nuclear power plants electricity and the green electricity, but based on the prices for gas, based on the lax in development of the green production capacities for electricity, because of all of that, there is a serious rethinking with the role of the natural gas as the transit fuel as part of the net zero carbon and the role of this transitionary period, as this is something which is mentioned by the whole world. Ukraine plays an important role in that because the NPPs play a very crucial role for Ukraine, and I believe that Ukraine has to join this dialogue. Today, new technologies are being developed, and I'm sure you heard about the small modular reactors and new technology that is being developed in the United States, in UK, in France, and China. And this is something that we need to be very serious to, as these technologies shall be used in future. They're applicable not only within the further development of the energy atom, but the further development of the TPPs, since they can replace the coal in producing this, the electricity. That is why our company will be studying these technologies. This is a perspective of 7 to 10 years. Only one company so far has a proper certificate in the United States. And this company has already signed an agreement with Energoatom. We are also establishing working groups with leaders in the development of this technology. So this is another answer to how we are going to produce the electricity without the use of coal in our TPPs. And we believe that this is the next step in DTEK Energo's development. In addition to net zero carbon, we've talked about the synchronization of our energy production systems, and the issue of synchronization after over 15 years has become a very important issue for the President and the Prime Minister and the government. We believe that the current synchronization plans, that is to start testing in the isolated mode and initiate further synchronization with ENTSO-E. It's real, it's possible from the technological standpoint, and the level of outflows could be increased by more than twofolds, and this allows us to initiate the export as well as increase the stability and reliability of the system. Besides, that's one more step towards the joining the European energy market. The synchronization of 2023, that's the prerequisite for market coupling, when all the segments of the market would be synchronized in the way it is done in Europe. And currently, the pricing at a day-ahead market would be based on the European components. And last year we've showed the single day-ahead coupling. That's the common day-ahead market for in between of the countries that have joined the system. And I believe that the market coupling and our steps towards joining the European market, that would be an important step towards the integration of Ukraine into the EU, which is one of the most important political and strategic goals for Ukraine. In the same time, there is a small but. Just last month, the head of the EU delegation of Ukraine gave us a clear signal that you can fulfill the technical protocol, and maybe Ukrenergo will do his job in a proper manner, but until we resolve all the situations and challenges we have with our markets, the synchronization would be fairly challenging. So that's a very important signal for us, for companies, as well as for the sector and for the state, as this is not an unsubstantiated statement, because this is the current status of the preparation of Ukraine to the winter. Unfortunately, if you remember, we had a meeting back in February, and I told you about some of the steps and activities and lessons learned with regards to the autumn and winter, and what could be the next steps in order to prevent any emergency situations or the risks from happening in future. Unfortunately, not all the lessons learned were previously analyzed. And currently, as of October, let's say, something like 9,000 megawatts, that's the deficient capacities in our system. The deficit of coal is around 2 million tons on warehouses. Last year we had around 2.5 million tons on warehouses. Now we have only around 500,000 tons in the warehouses. Of course, there are some external factors that have a role to play on that. There is an unprecedented increase in the prices for energy resources, the gas, the coal, the electricity. So this is the current situation. When you are identifying the diagnosis, you need to make certain conclusions and to analyze why this is happening. This graph is something that we've been showing since 2019. That's our heart rate rhythm. And please recall that those statements, that those graphs are being fairly consolidated. And the same consolidation we maintain in terms of the recommendations for our government. Still, there were many other reasons, many other explanations. Why are we right or wrong? But going back to this graph, over a period of 2 years, our sector and the pricing at the day-ahead market, as well as the regulation of the pricing, resulted in a situation when the prices were less than the original production price for the electricity. And it's very easy for us to prepare this presentation because we simply pick up the current data that we have and then insert it in the presentation. And that lack of funding and the economic misbalance that was introduced by the regulator and by the government, it resulted in a collapse of the financial system of the market. Only in September this year, we've started to recall that we have a liberal market, that we want to be a part of the European market, that there are some pricing signals that we are receiving from Europe with regards to the prices for the energy resources that the company has to receive profits in order to be able to invest, in order to have the operating assets, in order to have money for repairs and maintenance of the equipment. But unfortunately, we came to this understanding too late. We've clearly indicated in 2019 we have minus 14%. That's the price as referred to the original production price. Then at the net worth 160, the market price was 133. And that market price was set by the regulator and not by the market price. So, and that mechanism had to be finished by after 80 months since the establishment of the mechanism. I mean, they really like this mechanism, and so they've prolonged it in order to have the tools to manually regulate the prices on the market. What is the result? The result is the debts in several billions. The TPP's losses over 1 billion. The internal debts in between of the guaranteed buyer, the Ukrenergo, and this is the debts to all the stakeholders of the sector. Billions of debts of Energatom to those who produce green electricity, to the coal mines. Now, that is the result of the financial economic disbalance. What is the outcome? It means that there are no money for maintenance and repairs. There are no money for capital investments. And further operation of the equipment. And DTEK has invested over 12 billion of Ukrainian hryvnia in order to prolongate the operation of the power production modules. And speaking on the rates of failure at our equipment, now the situation is fairly grave at this point. And this is the slide that shows the investments. I mean, no matter the difficulties that we are facing, we are trying to allocate money, for particularly 1.4 billion previously, and we're expecting to have something like 2.5 billion as investments. And during the second half of the year, when we've received a signal that the regulator finally started to look at the economy and we've got some resources to restore the normal level of investments to our production capacities. Now, speaking about the 9 gigawatts of power, 1.8, that's the factor that we've received as the result of the emergency shutdowns, even though the press tends to call that as the major argument. But in fact, there's two factors: the lack of coal, and this is because of the lack of operating assets for funding the warehouses and procuring the coal, and the lack of gas. That is the availability of price caps. They do not allow, even if you have the gas, they do not allow to burn it without having significant losses. We had a situation with the Lugansk station, and the situation seems to be the same one, because as you might have heard, that the coal could be supplied only from Russia to the Luhansk TPP. Now the coal supplies has been terminated, and we're not sure whether the coal would be supplied in further. This may result in termination of the operation of the TPP. So for a certain period of time, we were, maintaining the operation of the TPP by burning the gas. And as the result, the price for our operations was 2.5 times greater. Unfortunately, that was the disbalance, and we're still talking with the government with regards to compensate that. So, because of this previous experience, we're now saying that we're not able to burn the gas at the current price, because we'll be receiving losses. And when we are saying that we don't have a gas, it doesn't mean that we don't have it in our system. It means that we are unable to burn it in order to compensate for the disbalance. Now a few words on our operation. And we tend to smile at certain statements of the experts saying that the coal is hidden somewhere in the mines, that we've reduced the amount of production or something like that. Starting in April, we had well-planned production indicators for the coal, and we had an agreement with Dobropolye coal that was returned to the public, and that was more than enough to supply us with the coal. So we worked in balance with Pavlograd coal, and as you can see, we have a fairly level indicators with regards to the coal production. But look at the coal production level at the public-owned mines. You can look at the level of production in Dobropolye coal and then compare those indicators. And as the result, you can see the dynamics in terms of the amount of stockpiles of coal. Last year we had 2.5 million of tons. In 2019 we had 1.6 million of tons. Today, in 2021, we have only 500,000 tons of coal is stockpiled. The first reason why don't we have a coal before the winter is the drops in the amount of coal production in public-owned mines. Why this is happening? Because they don't have money for coal production and coal extraction. Why? Because we have an artificial price for coal. And it's difficult to explain why the public-owned mines are selling coal at 2,150 hryvnia. And the market is offering to buy this coal for 3,500 or 4,000 hryvnia per ton of coal. I mean, our company can offer these price, but instead they are supplying the coal for 2,150 hryvnias per ton. And the disbalance is covered through the budget allocations. The math is pretty simple. If we would be spending 5 billion hryvnia to supply the coal, that's 2,000 per single ton. Should we have a market price for the coal? And to all the skepticists and those who believe that we have a conspiracy theory or something like that, I'd like to remind you once again, all the coal supply agreements, they are being signed by the formula API2 plus the shipment. That's the market indicator for the coal price, which is around 4.5 thousand hryvnia per ton. If our pricing would be based on the independent indexes, on the import alternatives, then we would have something different. The price for the public-owned coal would be around 45,000 hryvnia, and there would be no allocations from the budget to support the coal industry. Unfortunately, this is not something that we are having in our sector. So the first reason is the reduction in the amount of coal produced by the public-owned mines. At the same time, we don't have any problems with the coal production. We couldn't increase the amounts of coal production that we've organizing. And we're trying to compensate the coal production by controlling the amount of coal that we are producing from the other 9 months. Then the increased rate of burning of coal in our TPPs. This is the balance, this is what we have over the past 9 months after reducing those limitations with regards to the coronavirus. There was an increase in the energy consumption. And the increase was around 6%. And Energoatom had to cover the situation in order to ensure the consumption is fully covered. The amount of thermal generation has not changed, but I would like to remind you that back in April we had low prices for gas, and Center Energo was working by burning the gas and not the coal. And what happened, you can see that in June, July, 2.1 billion was increased to 2.5 billion, and then there was another change. Now, because of the consumption, we've burned more coal. Now, about the work of the DTEK, and I believe that this is a fairly indicative situation. Why haven't we managed to supply ourselves with our own resources in terms of the coal production? We had an increase by 2 billion in terms of the production. That's around 1 million tons of additional coal. And starting from the June until October, the TPPs are working with the minimum amount of equipment in operation, like one power generation module per station, because of the lack of coal. And the TEK is working 1.3 million in June, 1.9 in September, 2.6 in October. And they're saying that you've burned too much coal in July. But what would we do with our energy production system? Who would produce the electricity in July when there was an increase in demand? Let me finalize the briefing and I'll take the questions. And it would be wise to burn the coal whenever we are switching on the power generation modules. Now, talking about the failure rates and emergency rates and equipment. Once again, I'd like to say that the whole sector is using the minimum amount of equipment except for the DTEK. And the availability of additional power generation modules, like 3 to 5 modules, allowed us to do the emergency repairs. Because we need to consider a lot, particularly the amount of years we've been operating this equipment and the amount of investments we had a chance to allocate to their repairs. Now, a few words with regards to the dynamics on the financial situation around the thermal power generation. And as you can see, that for a certain period of time, there was a negative balance in terms of the production of thermal generating powers. Speaking of the prices at the foreign markets, the situation is fairly understandable. We can have like 2 or 3 times less the price for electricity than it is in the European countries. I mean, we can have a price for coal 3 or 4 times less than it is for the European countries. The solution to this question could be an import. Now let's talk about the imports of the electricity. According to our estimates, in the period from November till March, the deficit in the energy capacity was 5.5 million kilowatt hours. Now, how can we compensate for that? 2 billion kilowatt hours, that's the operation of our TPPs on the imported resources. Starting from November and until March, we have commissioned, we are in use of all the equipment that we have, and we guarantee our own coal for producing the electricity. So 5.5, that's we are working at maximum, and we have coal for that. And I'm absolutely responsible in terms of mentioning that. In order to cover 5.5 billion, the others, the Central Energy, has to work as well. And for them to work, they would need to have 1 million tons of coal imported. The price for that electricity is around $150 in Rotterdam. The second initiative is the operation of the electric power stations using a combination of gas and coal. We can produce more electricity out of that. And at this point, we would pay 4.5 hryvnias for the 1 kilowatt hour of electricity. I believe the Kharkivsky TPPs has to start their work. And considering the decision that was made yesterday, I think it will start their work today. But they would produce the electricity at a price of 5.5 hryvnia per kilowatt hour, and then an import from Russia and Belarus. If we would have 400 kilowatt hours, then we would be able to produce 1.5 billion over the autumn and winter. So this is something that we can use for our work. I mean, we're not using a mixture of gas and coal and our TPPs. That was the proposal. Whenever you'll be offering a special financial proposal, and this is something that we could do through modification of tariffs. Now then, over the next year, the industry, through the rates of the tariff in aggregate, they would be paying for that. Now, I believe that this price caps practice results in the fact that we're starting to come up with the mechanisms that are affecting the economy. Then another graph is very important. It shows how we are covering this deficit. Well, the first component is all the calculations were made based on the fact that out of 15 nuclear power generating blocks, 14 of them are operating. And then it's based on the fact that we would have 1.5 billion kilowatts hours from Belarus. Now imagine if we would have an emergency power shutdown at one of the NPP blocks. Remember there was a conversation why we had so many coal in the beginning of October, and then what happened to that coal in November? That's because we've shut down one block at the NPPs for repair. Now, the same risk is coming from the import. Why haven't we imported in summer, autumn, and winter? The import has reduced the price in 2019-2020. There could be different theories in practice. It's important for us to have the price, the energy security, our own consumption, the energy independence. Everyone has its own story, but we said that's only 1%. It solves nothing from the overall capacities, but it shows a very bad signal for prices in the market, because as you know, that's the political goods. There is no market value for this sort of type of electricity, and that's based on burning the gas at $150. And I believe that this is not a market approach. So a willingness to save the money or to create a competitive environment through the import from Russia or Belarus, this is something that creates the situation as we have it. It sends an improper signal to the market, and that also reduces the capacities of the national electricity producers, and we will have the energy dependence from our neighbors. Our consistent position was the following. We're not having anything against from the import of electricity from Europe. And this is just another example why this is not happening and why are we not raising the question about reducing the price caps for Burштyn, and then the Slovakia, the Hungary could be importing their or exporting their energy. So our position was fairly consistent. We believe there has to be a full liberalization and a freedom of outflows and a trade of energy in order to trade with countries that are not using the electricity as the political tool. Why was there a shutdown in coal supplies from Russia, and why they've blocked the transit of coal from Kazakhstan? This is the example of import. That's a whole detective story around the import from Belarus, and I believe this is still in progress. One more thing you have to think, how this import is happening, who's doing the imports, who's signing the contracts. Now that's a question for the future, but who can guarantee that this import will not stop? Nobody can guarantee that. And speaking about our long-term or short-term plans with regard to energy safety, the supply of energy resources through import in areas where we do have our own resources. I believe that this is a mispractice for our market that has resulted in the situation that we have right now. This is why we have to do a lot in order to, well, pass that autumn-winter period. We do have a lot of risks. How to cover this disbalance? By burning more gas, but if we'll have 3 to 4 billion kilowatt hours of deficit, we won't have enough technical capacities to cover that gap by burning the gas. I'm confident that our government will not allow this to happen. At what price this would be, this is something that our life will show. There is a fairly complicated graph which showed the balance in the operations of Centrenergo and the operations of DTEK. Here's all the calculations for Centrenergo if it will use the minimum amount of equipment per electric power generating station. That is why the minimum production is 700 to 800 million kilowatt hours, which could be covered through the production from public-owned mines and through the import of 200,000 tons to Centrenergo. But 1.1 billion, as we can see it as the deficit, like the lion's share of that capacity, that should be produced by Centrenergo. And for that to happen, it has to import the coal and start burning the gas. Speaking on the balance of DTEK, as I've said, the amount of production in the around 2.8 kilowatt hours is fully supplied with the coal. So in 2021, we have imported 2.9 million tons of coal. In the first quarter of next year, 600,000 tons of coal. This is something we've already contracted from Poland, and by sea. We have problems with anthracite because we don't have any alternatives, and hopefully the situation will be resolved at the national level. The, this is particularly important for our Luhansk TPP. Of course, in November, we do have problems with the amount of coal in stockpiles, but hopefully the blocks at the NPPs will be repaired and it will start operating. We'll have 3 NPP blocks starting to operate in November, and then we'll have 14 out of 15 blocks and NPPs operating. Hopefully they'll operate in a stable manner, and this will allow to supply us with the electricity. But in this case, we'll be dependent on the import from the sea. That's the summary of what needs to be done in order to cover this deficit. And hopefully the Energoatom will work reliably. And there's all reasons for us to state that. And hopefully the government and the Energoatom, they would be able to sustain that. I believe that 1 million of tons will be able to supply, and the other stakeholders also need to take a look at how the coal would be imported. I believe the regulator has to pay attention to those changes that we've introduced and the additional financial resources and the rate for dispatching that should be applied not only to the TPPs but to the TPPs operating at the combination of coal and gas, and we have to pay for all of that. Now, that's brief information, and hopefully we'll have a good discussion later on. During the Q&A session, I'd like to call upon the stakeholders and the government to start using long-term planning. Stop using this short-term planning. The Ukrainian energy system is self-sufficient. We can supply the necessary amount of electricity. We have to take wise strategic decisions. And currently, under the aegis of the Ministry of Energy, they are thinking of a new strategy. And hopefully that will reflect the trends that we've mentioned today in this strategy. We have to understand the balance of coal consumption as it is right now. On the one hand, we are welcoming the efforts with regards to the producers of the green electricity. The investors have to return, have to continue with the production of the RES production facilities. At the current price of electricity, it's 15 or 20% higher than the green tariff. And everyone said that that's too high, we cannot change this. Let's change this trend. Let's say that Ukraine welcomes the investors into green generation. And let's be honest. In terms of the importance of investing in that, in order to not to have any problems with the import of coal. So we are becoming a netto importer of coal over the next 3 to 5 years. And this coal is something that we would need to buy in advance. There has to be a program on the import of coal, and we need to understand where to buy this coal from. I guess not from those countries that could stop the supplies of coal by a decision of 1 or 2 men. Okay, thank you. And now we'll pass to Q&A sessions. And once again, I'd like to remind you, if you have a question, raise your hand, then wait for the assistant with the microphone, and then state your full name and the mass media that you're representing. So please. Okay, we'll start with the ICTV. So, if the options for crisis resolution will not be taken into consideration, when do we have the problems? And have you passed the NERC verification? Well, first, any issues with regards to shutdown of electricity supplies, I would remove that from the agenda. Our energy system is fairly stable in order to prevent the time-to-time energy shutdowns. And I believe in the government and the state that this is not going to happen. But there is a dialogue with the large industrial companies who can change their consumption. And whenever we do have a peak consumption and the lack of capacities is whenever we're saying the lack of capacities is to ensure that we have additional capacities during the night and day. So a normal dialogue would allow us to have those 2 or 3 gigawatts as a deficit could be covered by shifting the production during day or night. And the large companies can, well, can gain profit out of that. If you pay us, we'll shift the production for a certain period of time. That's why I don't believe we'll have any electricity shutdowns. And I believe that wise cooperation between Ukrenergo and the large suppliers of electricity would allow to cover the deficit. Speaking on the NERC and their verification, what do you think? With all this situation that we are having, should the NERC take a decision to do the verification of the amount of coal in our stockpiles and our warehouses? Of course, you don't need to travel too far. Here's the warehouse. Now, you can go there, you can see, you can issue the penalty, but you have to understand why this is happening. Because taking bold decisions is not enough to to regulate the energy sector. We have a general CEO, Ildar Saleyev. He can give you more detailed information on the verifications on the faults rate. Although I'd like to talk about the essence and not about the formalities. Of course, you can verify the warehouses, the licensed warehouses, where would you like to do that, but I've already given you the information. I've got 2 questions. Where is the critical situation in terms of the stockpiles at what TPPs? And we're talking about the coal or anthracite, and then according to Liga Antitrust, the production of coal by DTEK was fairly stable over a year, and the consumption at TPP was less than the production. Then there is a small component. The supply of coal to those TPPs has reduced since April. Can you confirm this information? And does that mean that you could have more coal at the stockpiles of your TPPs? Can you confirm this information? Look, I cannot confirm this information. From the amount of the levels of production of coal, I've shown you the slide, and that is the amount of coal we've produced every month starting from April. And you can see that's an equal line, and we didn't have any changes in the amount of coal production, 1.3 million of tons of coal. And we do have a critical situation. We are approaching to have a critical situation in Lugansk, because at most of the TPPs, the situation could be compensated through the imports of coal. So not a single TPP will stop, but not for the Luhansk. They will have the coal only until the 10th or 15th of December. No, I don't know. We're looking at this situation from an overall perspective. We don't need to have the coal stockpiles at the coal, and we are helping our colleagues. And whenever there is a critical situation at Center Energo, Donbas Energo, we are sharing our coal, And when the TPPs of Centrenergo were about to be shut, we've supplied them coal. And whenever there was a need to supply coal to Centrenergo, this is something that is not true because we've shared the coal with Centrenergo. Good afternoon. Thank you, Vitaly Kornienko. You told that there are other coal supplies from Kazakhstan and Poland. Where else can we receive coals from? And what are the capabilities of procuring coal? So how do we able to hedge what has happened with coal, and what's the prices? Well, there are three major directions for coal supplies. Coal from Poland, and this year we're expecting to have 500,000 tons of coal supplied from Poland, and they're fairly stable. We're receiving 80,000 tons of coal per month. We have contract on the supply of 80,000 tons of coal per month next year. So that's our top supplier in terms of the quality and the reliability. Then Kazakhstan. We were importing significant amounts of coal in the beginning of the year, but unfortunately there is a risk factor because of the transit through Russia. And the third, that's the global market. I've mentioned the D-Trading company. We have a fairly professional coal desk. So we are procuring coal at the open market from the traders and not from the coal producers. The largest amount of supplies came by sea, and in November, December, we're expecting to have a supply of around 400,000 tons. Most of the coal is coming from the United States, and then part of the coal is provided from Colombia. The prices are very simple. That's Rotterdam Plus. They're open. I mean, you can take a look at them. We have a formula, a pricing formula in the contract, the IP2 plus the cost of the shipment. What is the cost of the shipment? I can give you the prices for this agreement, starting from $160 to $250 per ton. Any other questions? Interfox of Ukraine, please. You were talking about price caps and the price is 4.5, 5.5, but we can see that the price is already reaching the price caps. We can see the pricing from DTEK, from Center for February, March for 9 hryvnias. So what should be the price caps and what principle would you suggest with regards to that? I've already mentioned that price caps is the malpractice. Let me give you one example. I've already told you that the price caps of European countries is 3,000 euro per 1 megawatt hour. So to compare with our price caps of 80 or 85 euros, meaning that they do not exist. The EU leaders just 3 weeks ago were discussing how the EU countries should respond to the large gas prices. And there were 2 ways, either by regulating the price caps similar to Ukraine, and second, by subsidizing the population or the business that is suffering from the gas price. And finally, they said we shouldn't remove our signals of interfering with the market. we have to find the ways to supply the final consumers, either by providing some financial benefits, either by reducing taxes. I'm not willing to say that should be 4 hryvnias or 5 hryvnias or 8 hryvnias. I believe that price caps should reflect the current market situation, either to, to set them at a level of 3,000 or to remove the price caps at all. Because the situation in April will change. We'll have a lot of energy coming from RAS, and the prices will be slower. But the ability to earn money gives us the resources that we would need in order to be able to repair the equipment, in order to produce the electricity during the first and second quarter. And that cycle should be supported not by the price caps, but through normal operations. Any other questions? SensorNet, please. It's business sensor, not. There's, as usual, a lot of questions, but I'd like to ask 2 questions. Could you comment the export of DTEK from Burstynska test to Europe? Something like 150,000 tons of coal is burned per month, and it's being exported to Europe. If we're talking about the physical deficit, there is a problem with logistics and resources, and not the operational deficit. Then wouldn't it be better for DTEK to pay the fines in Europe in order to use a couple of power production modules of the Burstynsky TPP to produce electricity for Ukraine? In order to overcome the period of the autumn and winter. And speaking on the import, there's a very interesting situation. I'm sure you're well aware of them, and only one company is importing. One is importing 400 megawatts. That's TED Group of Vitaly Butenko, and just during the previous press conference, he was sitting here. I'm sure you have conversations between one another. I know that over 10 companies were willing to import, but in fact, only one company is importing. That's the company of a former manager of DTEK. So do you know how Butenko managed to, get a permission to import? Well, first question about the expert. Speaking on the operating modes of the energy production systems, at first, their blocks were receiving the energy, they're producing the energy, and then we are exporting 2 million kilowatt hours per hour. Now the export is a minimum, and there is no relation to the export and our commitments. Absolutely, yes. We are trying to do the buybacks. We're trying to sell the energy, and whenever I'm saying that DTEK is supplying coal for itself, I say that it supplies enough coal in order to produce the electricity for internal and external market. We have problems with failure rate. As you know, the Burstynsky TPP is having a large operating load. That's why there is a certain risk of faults. But of course, we're working for Ukraine as the priority. Secondly, DTEK is the one who stands against importing electricity from Russia, from Belarus. We're not importing. Not going to say for sure that we're not going to import that from Russia and Belarus somewhere in the future. Maybe they will have a market economy, but I don't see us becoming the importers. Vitaly Butenko left the company in June, and he said about this on public, and He has his own company, his own agreements, his own economic relations. We don't have anything to do with his company. That's his solution, his decision. And you can see the graph over here. And we've placed a question mark at this graph. We don't understand the commercial component. Now, what's the price of Belarus for supplies to Ukraine? Maybe someone will tell us, but I can officially state that we don't have anything to do with that, and we are against imports from Russia and Belarus. Next question, please. Dmitry Yasnoy, Ukrainska Pravda. I have three questions. Two of them are very short. The first question is regarding the agreement with Geo Alliance. What's the stage of that agreement? Is there any risks of terminating this agreement considering the significant increase in gas prices? Because that will increase in the operating assets of the company. The second question is regarding the sales of the thermal generation business. DTEK made a statement that is ready to sell. Have you received any proposal to buy that aspect? And the third question is related to the EU integration of our energy production system. After that, the role of DTEK will be leveled, let's say. Now your group is having a leading position, but upon joining with the European system, the role of the DTEK will be reduced or leveled, so to say. And at the same time, you're supporting this integration. And some say that you're supporting that only by understanding that this process is inevitable. So since you don't have anything to have an impact on, that's why you publicly agree with that. So can you please substantiate the interest of the group to joining the Ukrainian energy system to the European one? Let's start with the simple question. The agreement with the Geo Alliance, we are not there in this process. This is the question to Geo Alliance. Now, the second question, a brief one, what was that? Could you remind that? Whether you have a lot of suggestions? Well, we haven't received anyone, and I don't think we will receive any suggestions with regards to the procurement. I don't believe we'll have any proposals on that. Well, first of all, thank you for calling us a leader and not the monopolist. Finally, we've overcome this with this situation, and I'm fully happy with the statement of DTEK as the leading energy producer with the Net Zero Carbon Initiative's leadership. Now, the business reason for us to support the synchronization and integration. First of all, we've invested 1.5 billion euros in green electricity, and we are currently developing a new project for the development of WPS. And we are also introducing the certification of the electricity origin. We'll announce that soon, and when the industrial suppliers will be interested in receiving green kilowatt hour, that technology would allow to confirm the origin of the green energy. We're looking at the European trends. Maybe you've heard about there is a CBAM, this carbon water adjustment mechanism, when the industrial consumers will be thinking of where to get the green kilowatt hours. So we believe that using RAS for electricity production is going to be one of our major components in terms of the investment plan. And speaking of gas, that's a transit resource. We are investing a lot in the gas production. We've invested $100 million this year in gas production, and we are currently discussing investments in around 180 $6 million as investments next year. Speaking on coal, we've received a clear statement from the president who committed Ukraine to abandon coal until 2035. So Ukraine will pay sooner or later the taxes for emissions, and we are currently paying a low price in Europe. That's 65 euros per 1 ton of emissions. And I would say that should we become a part of the European market, and it's not about the synchronization, but market coupling that I've mentioned, the cost of our business would be increased by a couple of times, because that's a business of clear energy, that's a client-oriented business, that's a business of new technologies, and I'm sure that the DTEK will be a leader in terms of energy storage and in terms of green hydrogen, and maybe in terms of the small nuclear reactors. We're doing everything in order to be competitive, in order to be a reliable participant of the market. And what do we receive in return? We receive European market rules. And this whole discussion about regulations, there will be no discussions like that. That's why we receive more advantages out of this integration and synchronization than remaining as the leader in the Ukrainian market. We clearly understand that market coupling is impossible without synchronization, and that's our final objective. And it's not the issue about the outflows, really, because that would not significantly change the situation. It would be good for Ukraine because the reliability of our energy system would be increased. Our final goal is to become a part of the European energy market. So hopefully you've heard the arguments behind our decision to support the integration process. Dmitry asked such a smart question, so I will try to continue with another smart question. Just three small questions. First is regarding the coal and its import. If we won't have an import and the transit of the coal from Kazakhstan, and there was a lot of coal contracted. So what will happen to this coal and the payment for this coal? Would the suppliers from Kazakhstan try to compensate this situation so that you could buy the coal from somewhere else, or you were negotiating the re-establishment of transit? I'm sure you were predicting that sort of complicated situation. Have you communicated this challenge in different platforms? Have you talked to any leadership or the government on that? Just recently, Vsevolod Kovalchuk, the ex-head of the Ukrenergo, he said that the peak consumption could be reduced if we'll change the bulbs, the old Soviet bulbs, into new LED energy efficient bulbs. And that would be much more much cheaper, that would be much effective. I mean, the DTEK has a department on that. Have you had any calculations with regards to the potential amount of energy that could be saved, particularly in the peak hours, by doing that? First question with regards to the supply from Kazakhstan. Well, we don't have any financial difficulties because we are paying for the supplied coal upon the arrival of the coal to Ukraine, so we don't have any problems. We talked to the ambassador of Kazakhstan, but now there is no information on that. That's a political decision with unsubstantiated reasons to support it. That is why we're not relying on coal from Kazakhstan. The position of Center Energo, well, you have to ask them. So the first coal was bought in August, so we looked at the predictions and we started contracting in August. Currently, we will have 7 shipments of coal at 75 to 100,000 tons per shipment. That's the second question. No, the second question was more about communicating this challenge with the president. Let me continue. We do have communications with the political authorities, of course. We participate in the meetings at the level of the ministry. We are providing our own analytics. We're offering solutions. And hopefully, they will tend to some of the solutions that we offer. It's important for us to have an active cooperation rather than try to search for a guilty one. You remembered this situation when we had on the 2nd of November, when we asked for assistance from Belarus. So the Ukrenergo came up and said that was because of the faults within DTEK. Even though this is not right, this is not correct. We've lost 1 billion in terms of the power generation of the green electricity, and we had an increase in the consumption by 1 billion. So we have a deficit of 2 billion in the peak hours, but unfortunately, Ukrenergo haven't mentioned that the rest of the producers of electricity were not supplying the electricity. And that's why they had to tell that it was because of DTEK that we had to import. It's either you tell the truth and we are ready to pay, to be responsible for whatever issues we are having, but don't provide the false information in any case. And speaking about the bulbs, we do have a company called ESCO, DTEK ESCO. Now it's Yasno ESCO. I believe Kovalchuk is right in saying that the energy efficiency is the cheapest resource, and you have to invest in that. We talked a lot about this, but there were no large-scale governmental programs. I believe that the state has to play an active role in that, and ESCO is currently cooperating with the industrial producers, and 80% of that goes with the industrial producers. So we're not having any programs with the population. You know why? Because there is no demand among the population. Why? Because we have 1 hryvnia 68 kopecks as the price for electricity. As long as we will have support like that for the population, we won't have any breakthrough in terms of energy efficiency. Any other questions? Please. The Ekonomiskaya Pravda. On one of the graphs, you've showed the amount of necessary import. That's where you've simulated one of the scenarios, and you said that this amount is 400 megawatt hours. Now, this is the amount of import that we are having from Belarus. So the import is done by TED Group and the electric community. And according to your information, since we do need this import, is there any agreements reached with the Belarus that would allow us to be provided with that amount of energy? And why the Energoatom couldn't reach the deal with Belarus? Well, thank you for this question. It's important for the grid system, but this is not the question to me. I don't know anything about the story with Belarus. I don't know who reached an agreement, what's the guarantees. I know that we don't have a coal from Russia, and I guess any day we can have problems with the supply of those 400 megawatt. From the point of balance, we might need to have this energy. From the point that it's not reliable and it's not stable, this is something that I've mentioned a lot. There is policy behind those agreements. I'm confident of that. But I don't know what's happening around this story. We are not part of this story and we will not be part of that. Next question. Bilan Energo Business. You described about this commitment to abandon coal until 2035. And how calculated is that commitment? I mean, can we do that? Can we fulfill this commitment? And maybe we should analyze the experience of other countries that are actively developing the rest, for example, Australia, and saying that, oh, well, they're not saying that they will abandon the use of coal, they will continue to use the coal in the future. Well, it's good that you're looking at the trends. And that's absolutely fresh information with regards to the position of Australia. I believe that there were some calculations. I don't believe that commitments like that could be or should be done based on the calculations. And hopefully we will have this strategy of the energy sector development until 2035. And hopefully this strategy will give you an answer to that question, because a lot would depend on that strategy with regards to development of our company. We have this goal, and the answer to reaching this goal should be in this strategy. And we will adjust our operations based on this strategy. But nobody, well, talked to your company, I mean, before committing to abandon the use of coal. Well, that was the commitment in the frames of the initiative. DTEK was the first and the only company that joined this initiative, even before Ukraine has joined the initiative as a state. And I talked about that in Glasgow during the first day discussion. We've stated that we could have a chance to abandon the use of coal by 2040. We have calculations on that. But how the state will do that by 2035, this is the issue that was not discussed with us. I have a question. Your predictions on the import of Belarus are based on the fact that we will have 400 megawatts every day. Why? Why do you have the same calculations as the TED group? Why? Because, I mean, the same answer I can give you, because they're saying this number. I mean, if they would say 1,000 megawatt hours, then we would say 1,000 megawatts. I mean, we're the price takers at that point. Next question, please. I know that DTEK is importing coal and is expecting to have another coal shipment from the United States. And is that efficient from the logistics standpoint? Maybe we can import from some countries which are located closer than the United States. Look, we have a professional trading desk, and I trust our traders. And they're looking for the best price quality and logistics ratio. We are buying that coal from the international market. We don't have direct agreements with the suppliers. And since Ukraine will become a net importer of coal starting from the next year, and those agreements we're having, they are agreements with the global market. I trust them. I believe that this is the best price and logistics possible. From the point of on impact of the end user, well, I believe that the import of coal, this is not the only factor that has an impact on the end users. And I believe since there are so many factors, I don't believe this will have an impact on the end users. The price for the industry increases based on the prices available globally. And this is not only related to the price for the shipments of coal from different countries. Any other questions? It would be interesting to talk about the green electricity. You're saying that you're preparing a large project on WPS, and it will be still working based on the green tariff. And it mentioned that by 2023, the tariffs will still be in action for WPS, considering the price cap of 4 hryvnia. And in my understanding, the grid tariff for WPS is slower. And since this is a long-term trend, what would need DTEK to have in order to continue with the development of WPS without the grid tariff? I mean, you can start building solar power stations already and not wait for the change in the green tariffs. Well, thank you for the question. The project we are developing, it will not work based on the green tariff. This project will be based on the PPA, or we're going to sell at the open market. The last project, the Telegunska station, that's 500 megawatts according to the green tariff. The rest would not be using the green tariff. Should we compare the price with the European price? I'd say we have a low price. Should we compare that with the situation last year? Well, that's high. All of these new projects, they will be based on the PPA, and I'm sure that Metinvest, the Arcelor, the Western companies coming to Ukraine, I'm sure they will sign long-term agreements on the supply of green electricity. We've been working already for more than an hour and a half. Just want to warn you that we'll finish our conference very soon. We'll have time for 3 questions, no more. We had one of your press conferences, and you were talking about the functions of Eldar Soliyev and Dmitro Sakharuk, and the division of responsibilities. Is that still the same? Or were there any changes? Or are you planning to have any changes with regards to the top managers of DTEK? Because there were different rumors. Thank you for the question. We have a stable company for 17 years, and I believe that this brings further stability into the industry. I remember that you mentioned about my possible transfer to London, but I'm still here. Dmitry is the key person in terms of integration, in terms of talking to regulatory bodies, in terms of net carbon zero. And as I've said, we are creating this position. We're assigning one of our top managers on that position, and he's doing a lot of job for that. He's building the future of our company. Ildar Saleev is working with the heritage of our DTEK Energo and is doing everything to have a future for this company, even after 2035, even after with this relation to coal. We have a very professional team. We have an infrastructure of our electric stations, and all of that proves that we'll have a successful company, hopefully under the control of Ildar Saleev. We haven't talked about the tech grades and suppliers. Any plans or any investments to develop the DTEK grade? What about the liquidity? Do you need to introduce any steps? Because we've heard the interview of your colleague. He was talking about the Metinvest, but what are the perspectives for your companies? Thank you for the interest to our company. I can share with you some information. Right now, we're having an active internal discussion on the role of the corporate center and how we are positioning a group of companies. We have 6 operational holdings: coal generation, green generation, gas production, grades trading, and retail. Now, these are the 6 companies. These are independent companies. They have their own supervisory board. They have their own advisors, investors. They have their own risks, their future, and strategy. So a form of combining them into the whole group, that's been changing. And the corporate center will be solving less operational questions. From the point of future developments and investments, as I've said, that the green energy is the developing business, and green DTEK Renewables is currently considering how to increase its capacities, how to take into consideration the green hydrogen. And speaking about our oil and gas business, hopefully we'll work with both oil and gas. We do have a license, and hopefully we'll have the first oil in the company sooner or later. That's the developing business for us. We've shown down the sustainability, and this year we should have the best indicators in terms of gas production, and there are plans to further develop, to attract further investments to this gas production. And it's all about the investments in the deep drilling and the recon. And just 2 months ago, we've opened new reservoirs of gas. We've uncovered them, and that increased the inflow of daily gas production. And I believe we could increase the level of annual production to 3 to 4 billion cubic meters. The DTEK grades, as you know, we are waiting for a decision of the Anti-Monopoly Committee, and you know the system. This is the natural monopoly which is governed by the state, so hopefully we won't have any troubles with this agreement. We are trusting in this business. I believe that we can develop a whole lot of projects, and the green capacities. The grids play a very important role, and they require investments, and we will invest in the grids. So it's not about widening the scope of grids, but increasing the investments in the grid. I'd like to say that we are at the stage of transition, and we need to bring more technologies into this company. Just a couple of words about trading. We had changes in this company. New people, professional European traders, and they will bring a lot of us. And this coal that is being supplied and shipped to Ukraine, this is the result of the work of our traders. So we are developing a professional trading company working in Ukraine and in foreign markets. I'm sure that there will be a great future for this trading company, and hopefully will join the list of the global trading companies. So we are rethinking about the management system for the group, and we have a strategy for the development of every companies that we have. On the structure of the capital, the situation with the liquidity is changing for the better. We're spending a lot for the procurement of coal because we have to introduce a lot of advance payments. But this situation is not as bad as it was 2 years ago, as there was a change in the prices. We're thinking about the capital market, speaking about the green generation. That's all about the projects. We have to be an active participant in the market, and the issue of Eurobonds, we've piloted that, and that was a successful. We also welcome similar activities of Energoatom. Speaking about the green electricity, will be an active participant in the market. Speaking about the oil and gas, we have a high level of liquidity considering the current prices. That is why the income will be reinvested into the further development of the oil and gas production. Speaking about the DTEK grids, we need to work further. I believe that was the right decision by the regulator in terms of introducing RAB tariffs. We need to be sure that that's a stable system, that nobody is willing to cancel that. And there were some ideas like that in summer. When the market players will see that the RAB is working and the state complies with its commitments, then we'll start having monies into that. And last question. The question on the relationship between DTEK and Russia. Before Q&A session, you were talking about political motivation behind the decisions. Does that mean that you've finalized this process of returning control over the mines? And the second question, what is the status of the process of litigations for the reimbursement of losses? Well, I'm not a politician. I'm not changing my rhetorics. I'm in for business. I'm speaking some clear aspects. And the situation with the coal, that was the political decision of Russia. And there's no change in my rhetorics. Now, talking about the coal business and our relationship with Sberbank, we are currently in the process of negotiations with Sberbank, speaking on the settlement of this indebtedness. And since it's impossible to supply the coal to the Luhansk TPP, hopefully there will be a decision in a month or two. That's my expectations. Very sensitive negotiations. I cannot provide you with more details on that. Speaking about the Crimenergo, in September, we had the court hearings initiated finally. There was our position, the position of the Russian Federation, and until the 17th of November, we have to give an answer to the questions that we've received. And according to our plans, we should have a decision by March, April next year. But in any case, I believe there will be an appeal to this decision. So that's an active negotiation issue. Good. So we can finalize our today's meeting. I'd like to pass the floor to the conclusive remarks. Once again, thank you for your interest. I can see a lot of familiar faces and those people who joined our conversation. Once again, I'd like to express words of gratitude for you writing about this and for you trying to get an understanding about this very difficult and complicated subject. Our company is always willing to support you, both with the analytics and with different recommendations and proposals. Because today people tend to speak more about the winter challenges, but please take a look at that from a wider perspective with the aspects that we've mentioned in the beginning. There are dramatic changes in the energy sector, and this is something that was not happening for many years. And those dramatic changes, they provide us with enormous capabilities and opportunities, both for the business and for the government. Now, hopefully, we'll be able to use all of those capabilities. And the more we'll be discussing about those capabilities, the more you'll be asking questions whether we'll be able to implement that or not. This will have a significant impact on the development of the sector. DTEK remains a stable company, not only from the point of the management, but from the points of our development. We've gained a lot of experience. We have proven ourselves as an experienced team, ready to cooperate with other stakeholders and with the state. Unfortunately, sometimes people tend to talk about conspiracy theories that we're not producing coal, we're not supplying coal. We will do everything possible in order to supply and support the period of autumn, winter of this year. And I'm sure there will be some lessons learned from the point of our own planning. And hopefully, we won't have any meetings necessary to discuss about winter and autumn situation. So thank you for everyone joining our situation online and offline. And this is the end of the press conference.